Hi, welcome to Conversations with the Body. Today on Conversations with the Body, we are going to talk about the topic of what about my gift? What about my gift? This is a question that some people are asking in the congregation because they feel like their gift is not necessarily active. But it also causes a call for recognition of irony because at a leadership level, this is also something that leaders are asking in regards to why are people not active in their gift. So we have there kind of a correlation. We've got people who are saying, why am I not active in my gift? And the leader's saying, please get active in your gift. So it's very interesting as to see why that is. I believe that kind of the structure of church at this time can kind of lean towards why that is. And I also believe that, sometimes our expectation of church, what our mindset of what church is and what it's supposed to look like can also, support in this issue kind of growing within the church as well. I think when we look into kind of like the early church, we see that there were several things that were kind of like several ingredients that were present in the early church, and they were seen as kind of like key things. And I think now kind of we don't kind of take all of the elements and say, okay, these elements are like key for us. And I think there's just kind of like some that we've traded and said, okay, these are kind of like maybes, but these here are kind of necessary. And I think when we look at in Acts 2:41-42, when you read that, and you can read that in time, you'll see that there was some key stuff. There was apostolic leadership and direction that was taking place. There was fellowship that was taking place. There was the breaking of bread that was taking place. And there was prayers. I'd just like to add as well, the breaking of bread that was taking place then, it wasn't just, having a piece of bread and, a cup and just passing it around. It was, they would have meals. They would have a feast together and a meal together. And I feel like now with our kind of understanding of church, some of those things we see as necessary and some of those things we don't. So if we look at it, we said that there was kind of like teaching, direction, instruction from the apostles. There was fellowship. There was breaking of bread and meals together, shall we say. And also obviously the Last Supper, having supper with each other. Breaking of bread, and then also as well there was prayers. Now I feel like if we was to kind of like talk about the gathering of the church at the moment, if we gathered and we didn't have fellowship and we didn't have any breaking of bread, but we had, let's say, teaching and we had prayer, I feel like as a church at this current time, we would feel like we had met and had something of substance. But imagine if we had just kind of like removed teaching and removed prayer and just had fellowship and just had the breaking of bread. So we just met up, we just fellowshipped, we just had the breaking of bread, and then we left. Like, would we consider that was a successful meeting? I don't think we would, but I think today it's acceptable for many for us to just come to a building and listen to a teaching, and for that to be the main thing and the main reason for why we actually met up. And I think that this is one of the challenges and one of the issues that has started to creep into our church life and the way that we actually do church. I think the understanding and the expectation is that on a Sunday when we meet and we come together, that we come together and we meet and we're going to just listen to the teaching, and that's going to be it. I mean, when you generally ask somebody, how was church on Sunday, for example, people will just talk about usually the message, what was preached, what was said. And I think that's one of the issues, because, there's so much more that comes along with it. And then, at the same time, you could speak to people and they might kind of have a bit of an issue with the fact that they might feel a little bit lonely, or they might feel like there wasn't any effective fellowship taking place. But if you was to ask them in the same breath how was church, they wouldn't usually speak about that straight away. They would talk about the topic of the teaching. So I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding between what we expect of a Sunday, on a Sunday gathering, but then also what we expect in regards to our needs and our needs getting met. But then, likewise, from a leadership standpoint, I feel like there's an expectation for people to get involved and bring their giftings to the table. But I think that there's some stuff that we need to speak about and look at in order for that to actually happen and kind of take place. I feel like with kind of Sundays now, Sunday gathering, there's an opportunity for people to come together and listen to a message to inspire them and to kind of, prepare them for the week, so to speak. But there isn't necessarily the opportunity for that person to also participate, because when God places giftings within every single person, he gives us something to bring to the table. And I think when we look at the early model of church, we would see that, there was the apostolic address, or call it, where the apostles would, teach, and there'll be, direction in that sense. And there is a time for teaching. But I think that there was also a major emphasis on kind of fellowship and changing the monologue to a dialogue. And I believe that we can really see that in 1 Corinthians 14, 26 to 28. Paul's speaking to the Corinthians church, and he says, "What then, brothers, when you come together, each one has a hymn, a lesson, a revelation, a tongue, an interpretation. Let all things be done for building up. If any speak in tongues, let there be only 2 or at most 3, and each in turn, and let someone interpret. But if there is none to interpret, let each of them be silent in the church and speak to himself and to God." So we see, we can see there within this scripture that when Paul was talking about when the brethren come together, let someone have a song, someone have a revelation, someone have a tongue, and you see this real participation that was taking place. There was an opportunity for the congregation to get involved in expressing what God is saying through them. And I think that as a church, we have to kind of focus on how do we create those opportunities. That's why one of the reasons I'm really passionate about home church and a home church setting, and creating home church opportunities within large gatherings, because there's an opportunity for people to be active within their gifts. Also as well, there is kind of, I think there's a misunderstanding sometimes in regards to giftings. And I think when we look into scripture, we can see that, where is it? Yeah, so 1 Corinthians 12, 7 to 11, there's a list of gifts that are listed here. And these gifts are kind of miraculous gifts, so you've got kind of like utterance of wisdom and knowledge. You've got the healing gift. There's different gifts. You have to read those gifts now. These are kind of like miraculous gifts that people have that are miraculous. But then when you look into like Romans 12, 6 to 8, and these are gifts of grace, and there's some other gifts. There's gifts of kind of like service and serving. Also, there's gifts of like exhortation, which, encouraging people. There's gifts of generosity, just being generous. And some people are gifted in these gifts. They don't necessarily have a miraculous gift, and they might just have kind of like a gift of grace. And you could be somebody who has a gift of grace, and you're kind of like frustrated because you kind of like, we look at sometimes these other gifts and put them on a pedestal and say, okay, this gift is kind of like a big gift, a great gift, and this is a gift that I want to be operating in. You know, this person, you know, is goes around healing, or, you know, this person, you know, prophesies, you know, and I'm just like extremely generous, you know, or, you know, I'm just an encouragement. You know, I know a brother who is an encourager. Like when he comes into the room, everybody feels solid. There's a certain peace that comes about with that person just being there. There's a certain encouragement that generally people have. Like if there's an issue and there's a challenge and he steps into the room, you feel like, you know, we're going to get a resolve on this thing. He just has a gift of, you know, that's his gift, is an encourager. And sometimes these giftings are also what's kind of overlooked. So I think that there's two things that we have to kind of take into consideration when, you know, feeling these frustrations. I think the first thing that we have to look into is, and this is in conclusion, I feel like the first thing we have to take into consideration is, as leadership, is just making room for people to connect in a more effective way, and kind of helping to change the psychology of the general believer, which is, you know, church is about going to a building, listening to free hymns, taking an offering, you know, preaching, an announcement, you know, say hello to two people and then go home, you know, like that whole idea of that being church, just kind of changing that psychology and having people understand more that, you know, fellowship is essential, is key. You know, fellowship is essential, is key. Sitting down with one another, having meals, spending time is a key thing. So I think as a leadership, we have to kind of create opportunities for that and also encourage that as a part of the ethos and the culture of our congregations. And then the other side of it is, I feel like kind of people have to recognize that sometimes their giftings may be a gift of grace that, you know, isn't like seen as a great thing by those who kind of like want to, I don't know, kind of, how can I put it? Like people who want to kind of put kind of certain gifts on a pedestal. So like gift of grace might not get that. And but to understand at the same time that the gift of grace is just so needed in a place of fellowship. It's key, and it's needed. It's not a thing where it's kind of like, you know, it's not that gift, so it's not that good. It's a gift that's needed, but it might be a gift that is kind of a bit more low key, one that's not necessarily, you know, people are not talking about all the time. But it's a gift that, you know, when it's needed and it's felt, that it's going to bless people's lives. So I think that if we look at these things and we kind of start to have some conversations around them, I feel like if we start to take action on them and start to have some understanding on them, I feel like we're going to be more effective at people not having to ask that question of, what about my gift? So yeah, once again, thank you for Conversations with the Body. It's been great seeing you again. Hope the conversation has kind of sparked some things off for you. Feel free to like, to comment, to share, and no doubt subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can stay up to date with our conversations. So thank you and take care. God bless.